Hey Hawaii, this is Poka Lainui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. We had been talking about PTSD, the issue of shame, the issue of guilt, and perhaps some ceremony by which we can process these issues. We've had some callers earlier, one particular caller speaking on that particular subject. Our telephone number here is 524-1080, and rather than making any further preliminary statements about the program, I'll just go ahead and invite your telephone calls on this issue. Our telephone number here is 524-1080, but before doing that, I should say that we are produced by the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. The opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of this radio station or of the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. We go to our next caller. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Hello again, Poke.
Yes, good morning.
It's time to congratulate you on your providing such a source of wonderful ideas. Very exciting this morning.
Thank you.
The idea of this post-traumatic stress syndrome, it seems to me to be evolving. It was a syndrome, and then it became a disorder, and I wondered when it would become a disease. And I think the professional person who was just talking about with all his information said that that appears to be when the genetics are impacted. I can't think of the word right now for it. When there's damage done to the gene material, and then that would become a disease. And I guess there's different classifications for that in the VA in order to get more support. I don't know, but I was just wondering about when stress evolves into a disease. And I think he answered that question. And there's also, there's so many things. I would like to hear the difference between the soul and the spirit. Because he referred to that.
Yes, a soul wound, he calls it. And I don't know if he
did use the word spirit, and that made me wonder, what's the difference? I have never heard anybody approach that, and I think it would make an interesting discussion. Well, I just want to thank you again for providing such a wonderful program. It's a great way to start the second half of the year. Thank you.
It is the second half of the year. It's the first day of the coming week for the second half of the year. Okay, thank you for calling and for bringing that to our attention. We'll continue with the discussion and call back. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone and join in the conversation.
Thanks again, Poka.
Okay, take care. Aloha. And if you would like to call, our telephone number is 524-1080. From the last conversation in the earlier hour that we had, the caller pointed out that there are certain processes, and these are processes of reconciliation. Sometimes it's called a Peace and Reconciliation Panel in South Africa, and of course Mandela was chief among those who pushed for that process. There have been others who have followed that process with some adjustments, so there are at least a process that one can go through to resolve these issues. In Hawaii, I have tried to address such a process or a similar process using the practice of ho'oponopono, which was usually a process within families, but it gave families and individuals within families an opportunity to confess, to seek or to apologize, to seek forgiveness. And so it was a very public way, or at least within the family, to address one's guilt, one's sense of shame, things like that. And so it would be, I would suggest, a Hawaiian expression of peace and reconciliation with an outlook to finally achieve that. Of course, ho'oponopono was used for many other practices, but in essence, to make well again a situation that has been destabilized as a result of certain activities. How can we create a similar process within Hawaii and within the United States of America, by which these soldiers who are faced with a sense of guilt, a sense of shame, a sense of having participated in war that they are not proud of, other than the tossing back of one's medals. And I think that would be yet another process, and it had shown to be very effective for at least those who participated. And it may have been a venue or an avenue for other military personnel to have shared, what do you call it, not by their own participation, but by viewing the participation of others, and I forget the term for it, but to be able to share in that experience vicariously, that's a term for it, and to use that as part of a healing mechanism. How would such a process be shaped? I think maybe a public event in which public apologies will be received by a panel of victims who have suffered from such wars, such atrocities, or whatever it is, or by a writing of a letter campaign or a signing of a large, continuous or long sheet of paper in which soldiers can come up to, sort of coming up to the wall and expressing their regret, their apology, things like that, and then putting it together and then sending it to Iraq, Afghanistan, to Vietnam or other places. The wall of apology, or the sheet of apology. Very similar to the expression of aloha and the expression of concern that we conducted here in Hawaii when the Ehime Maru was sunk. Many of you may recall that this was a ship that was an education ship in which a lot of Japanese students were on, and through the maneuvers of a nuclear submarine, the U.S. Navy submarine, it was called the Greensville? USS Greensville, that shot up into the air from underwater and sunk this ship. And as a method of curing the injury that was left in the land, many of us, and I say us because I had been involved in that creation of that ceremony, within that ceremony it was not only publicly speaking about it and the apology that we wanted to express, not because we, the Hawaiian society, had participated in the event, but because it was our land in which it occurred, and that we should take a hand in the processing of this shame, of this guilt, of this bad feelings that was left in the land. And so one of the things that we did was sign our names and write an apology, and then send it off or gave it to the survivors of the village. I think it was known as the Ehime village. But that kind of public process in which veterans and others who participated in that war and are ashamed of it may have their process of healing as perhaps a first step in addressing, if they suffer from any other post-traumatic stress syndromes or disorders or disease, they can begin that process of curing. Our telephone number is 524-1080. Let's go to our telephone caller. Aloha, caller. Welcome to the program.
Morning, Poka. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you very well.
I can hear you well, too.
Okay.
Thank you for taking my call. A good subject about this situation. Can I share a story about my experience?
Sure. Go right ahead.
In 2000 of March 25th, my dad, he's with the 442nd Regiment Combat Team. He was at the reunion at their 57 at Sheraton Hotel. And there was an accident in the parking lot where two veterans
ran over. I heard about that.
Yeah,
yes.
one of the veterans was my dad, who got run over by a fellow veteran. And my dad's best friend was with him, too, also in the 442.
Yeah.
We had a healing process where we met with the fellow veteran who ran them over. It was a healing process at the Sheratons. We met him face to face. He was, of course, emotional, crying, and apologizing. We forgave him for what happened because we know what he went through, and we didn't want him to suffer anymore. So the healing process was there. We did speeches to express our feelings and whatnot to at least break the barrier of at least give forgiveness. And it was very hard, and the hardest part was to in my case was to not only forgive but to watch my dad pass away at the hospital. And it was a real emotional thing, and it's a traumatic thing to go through. But the healing process was very good to do because it gave us some time to forgive and
and to let it go, sort of.
And I think that's what most people is the hardest thing, is to forgive and to move on. And of course, the veteran died 3 years later. His health just went down, but he must have suffered from a lot of stress and whatnot.
But at least that helps him also to relieve the sense of responsibility, with this ceremony.
So we just wanted to do that. It gave us a closure actually for everybody. So, that's what is good if we can do that for forgiveness. What you said.
Let me ask you another question, because I want to move into yet another area and ask if this healing process that you talk about, and let's say in Japan, I would expect that the culture calls for and gives opportunity either in their churches or in some more acceptable places, this process of going through the healing. And of course, you also have what do they call it? Senpaku, or killing oneself because of the shame or embarrassment or dishonor to the family line. But you have at least those methods to address those issues of shame and sense of guilt. For the Japanese culture, you have this healing process. For the American culture, I don't know if it's a culture too young yet, but within the indigenous communities, within these cultures, or within these places that is now considered to be America, you still have those practices in which you have ceremony. And I would expect that as Native Americans, as they come back from war, you can go through either a sweat lodge or through a process to cleanse the soul, sort of, how do you see that in terms of American soldiers being able to go through a process? Is it a cultural barrier that they have not really become sophisticated enough yet to address that, or is it just being blocked by political positioning?
Well, it's hard to say. It could go either way in my case. But one time I was watching C-SPAN, and they had these medical doctors from the VA, military guys, and they're saying they need more physicians capable of handling this post-traumatic stress syndrome. And it's very hard because they don't have enough doctors to cope with all these veterans that are coming back. And I used to work at the Marine base, and I had Marine friends, and I dealt with their wives, and I used to work with them also. And it was kind of hard when they come back from the war, and they have these emotion and stresses and whatnot. So it causes some kind of rift between the
spouses.
Spouses, divorce, or they wake up from any kind of noise, and they're sweating, and they have bad dreams and whatnot of what happened when they were out there. So I can imagine what they're going through.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing your story.
Good subject.
Thank you. Take care. Aloha. And if you would like to call and join in this discussion, our telephone number here is 524-1080. This is Poka Lainui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. The question, how does